This conference will now be recorded.
Be good for another slide.
All right, we're ready to go. Good. Yes. Good morning. I'd like to call the December 2nd, 9 a.m. meeting of the Supplemental Retirement Board of Trustees to order. If you'll stand and join the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, justice for all. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. There'll be a public comment sections for individuals and organizations to address the board later in the meeting. If you go to the GoToMeeting part, you can sign up for public comments in our chat box. If you're attending a meeting in person, please sign up via our sign-up sheet. And continuing with our initiative to increase government transparency, we've established a policy to record and video of all official public meetings like this one, and make those available on the department's website. Support for us to increase accessibility of public meetings that fall under the authority, and today's meeting is being recorded under this initiative. I want to let you know about several requirements that we must comply with by law for a public meeting. Take roll call by name. Without objection, anybody who makes a motion or a second will be considered those to be a yes vote. Hearing no objection, if you must leave the meeting at any point, please announce your departure. If you return, announce your return. And these items of leaving, coming, or going will be recorded in the meeting minutes. Likewise, please state your name before speaking. We take all votes by roll call. Finally, text or other communications between board members during the meeting, even on personal phones, is to the extent they concern the activity of the meeting, considered to be public record. The secretary will call the roll.
Okay, Treasurer Falwell.
Here.
Isabella Thomas.
Present.
Lorraine Johnson. James Lumsden.
Here.
Melinda Barron.
Here.
Michael Lewis.
Here.
Nels Roseland.
Here.
Steve Beam.
Here.
And Wyndon Hibbler.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you all. As you know, Chris Farr, Mrs. Chris Farr, who's been the chief of staff for the last 4.5 years, has retired. I'd like to introduce Ted Brin. Ted is the current acting chief of staff. He comes to us with a wealth of experience in state government, having served for 37 years at the Employment Security Commission, later to be called Division of Employment Security. I had the privilege of knowing Ted as the chief of staff at that division, and we have worked closely together in the past. And from time to time, he may serve as my designee to the board in my absence. Laura Rowe has done a good job of getting him on board. So, Ted, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Also, Lauren DeMay, assistant director, has left the department in September for an investment position in Florida. Chris Morris, co-chief investment officers, handling the SRP investment until Lauren's former position is filled, which we're currently working on. Ethics Awareness Act, please take a moment to review the agenda. Does anyone have an appearance of potential or the appearance of a conflict of interest regarding the matters that are before us? Statement of economic interest. In the appendix, you'll find an SEI evaluation form for Ted Brin. State Governments Act conflicts of interest identified in the evaluation will be recorded in the meeting minutes. So the evaluations will be made at today's public meeting and will be a part of the meeting minutes as a periodic reminder of those conflicts that are as identified at the State Ethics Commission. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Next, we'll ask for a motion to approve the meeting minutes. August 26th. Might have had so much sugar this morning. Second. Two people. Motion is second being made of the approval of the meeting minutes. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Okay, Treasurer Falwell,
Aye.
Isabella Thomas,
Aye.
James Lunston,
Aye.
Michael Lewis,
Aye.
Steve Beam,
Aye.
and Wyndon Hibbler.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you for approving the minute, Sam.
He is, but he's not here.
Okay. Sam's had a long year.
Yes.
We'll give him a little leeway. No, you don't normally have session where you have to put up Halloween decorations and Christmas decorations before the General Assembly gets out of town. But that's what happened this year. And if you've ever seen Sam on roller skates in the General Assembly, it does a lot of work. So we'll just dispense with that without objection until Sam gets here. We'll next go to Zora. Zora is our communications officer. Talk about our annual strategic plan and communication.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction and for having me this morning. Having that up on the screen. So I'm very excited to share with you all some communication highlights from 2021, as well as discuss our strategy for the coming year. Thank you. So one of the top things we focused on this year was our participants and truly having a participant first mentality with the content that we created. And I think a really great example of that is actually up on the screen right now, where we began to use real members discussing the importance of being retirement ready and encouraging other people to join the plan. And what you see is actually a snapshot of a campaign that we did for social media for National Retirement Security Month. And this campaign was very well received and had quite a bit of engagement. So it's something we want to duplicate in the future for sure. So next slide, please, okay? So using real members with our communication efforts was just one of the ways that we increased engagement. We also increased the amount of virtual consultations and educational webinars, and we saw a rise in participation across the board. One of the other key things we did was really empower people to use the real-time enrollment tool. And this really shows that people are able to enroll online, and we saw a 65% increase in the amount of visitors who went to the plan and information and enrollment webpage year over year. So that shows to us that people are using the technology that was launched last year, and people are actually really using the tools that we created for them. So of course, that's something that we're really excited about. Next slide, please, Patty. So sharing some website statistics with you, here you'll see a snapshot of the most visited web pages throughout the year, and we continue to see engagement increase. And one of the things I wanted to point out was that we saw an 18% increase in engagement and the total amount of unique visitors to the NC Plans website. And this is really nice to see, an 18% increase year over year. So next slide, please, Patty. So you can see the impact that our communication efforts have had on members and participants, but we've also had a really successful time really engaging and educating employers. And one of the key things we did with employers is build out a simplified employer education website. And on this page, it acts as a one-stop shop for employers. And there they can get resources like an audit corner and very targeted events just for that. So in fact, as of November 18th, we've seen almost 6,400 unique employer visitors to this education website. And they continue to seek out tools that we provide them, like the employer handbooks, our match listing guides, and of course, our Getting Started book. So again, this really shows that they appreciate the resources that we're providing and they're actually using them. Next slide, please, Patty. So all of our efforts to really engage, educate, and empower reached new heights in October. And that's when we celebrated National Retirement Security Month. So of course, this was preceded by winning 2 leadership awards from NAGDA and by being nominated from NAGDA for the President's Award. So again, I want to extend my congratulations to the treasurer, board, and staff for this really great accomplishment.
And Christy.
And
Christy.
Christy's on the phone, so thank you, Christy. So as we kicked off National Retirement Security Month, we worked with the treasurer to create 2 videos where he discussed the importance of being retirement ready. And in this way, he became part of our campaign using real members. And this video is now featured on the NC Plans website as evergreen content. And we also shared it with employers and out on our social media channels. The second video with the treasurer was used to encourage participation in educational events throughout the month. So October saw more events than ever before. We saw more attendees than ever before, and our social media engagement in the month was through the roof. So all of this really empowered more people to enroll. And ultimately, October saw the highest number of enrollments that we've seen to date this year. And of course, that's something the team is very excited about. So next slide, please, Patty. So looking toward 2022, we found a communication formula that works, and we're going to continue to build on the positive momentum of everything we've done this year. That includes really pursuing a continued focus on digital tools, such as virtual consultations, and really using resources that utilize real-time data, as well as continuing our very targeted educational webinars for different groups. We're also going to continue to engage, educate, and empower our members, participants, and employers with a participant-first mentality. So as you can see, 2021 was quite a busy year, and we're very excited about what's to come in 2022. But in the interest of this jam-packed meeting today, I'm actually going to stop here and turn it over to you all to see if anyone has any questions about any of the slides or anything that was presented today.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What is the new MyRock program?
So very good question. So MyRock is a new tool that we've been working in coordination with Prudential. It's actually supposed to replace what we're now calling Grid. It's actually about to be announced and kind of offered to our participants in early December, so it hasn't been out there yet. It's a really great tool. We actually did a demo, Jeff, myself, and Christy. It utilizes real-time data. People can connect all of their accounts. And in general, it's a more holistic picture of your retirement kind of what your retirement nest, if you will, and what you're looking at and kind of what you can look at in the future. I'm not sure if maybe Prudential would have a little bit more information on that, but last time we spoke with them, we are on track to still launch in early October. So this new tool that utilizes more real-time data and gives a more holistic picture for our participants is something I think we're really excited about. And I think our participants are going to really like it as a replacement for Grid.
Thank you. I'm impressed.
And I think once you see the tool, you'll be even more impressed.
By the way, this is Melinda. Okay.
Anyone else or anyone on the phone?
Continue.
Okay,
Is that it? Okay, all right.
great, thanks, Will.
Gotta do this when you're through.
Ah, all done.
Carol Burnett. You probably heard of her. All right. Go back to Sam. Yeah, okay. That's easy enough. Sam Watts is joining us, and Sam, come forward and give us the good update.
Thank you. We had a very good year with the General Assembly this year. But I admit, that's nothing when you try to convince an 8-year-old to get in the car to go to school on a Thursday morning when she doesn't want to. So my apologies for not being here at the first opportunity.
So 0 for her.
Treasurer regularly keeps my kid with cereal boxes of cereal.
Your citizens get really discounted prices once in a while at Harris Teeter on cereal. So I give it away. So.
Just a few sort of baseline updates for you. We had 19 agency bills we requested that we got successfully through. The 19 agency bills or we kidnapped some bills and turned into agency bills as we went along, to be honest.
Hitchhiked.
That's a better, kidnapped, bad idea. Yeah. With roughly about 35 different bills where we had significant input on some of those to help them along and make sure they had the right language, and some of those to make sure that they not get helped along wrong language. The appropriations wise, very, very successful effort from the department. We funded the retirement system at more than $2.6 billion, funded the state health plan for active employees at more than $2.2 billion, funded the retiree health plan for retirees at more than $1.3 billion. That's a $450 million increase for the in the appropriations for the health plan. That's a $260 million increase for the retirement system, and it's really around $130 million increase for the retiree medical, and then on top of that, an additional $50 million into a unfunded liability solvency reserve, which is one of the treasurer's projects he's worked for a long time to ensure that we position the state to the best the remaining actuarial liabilities on retired medical program was closed for first hire January 1 this year and later. So pretty successful. Another issue that you guys were involved in last time I came to speak with you, the amendments that would have pulled you into a different budget relationship with the General Assembly were defeated. They did come back another time in the conference committee process, and I shared the resolution that you guys adopted to great effect. I believe they listened when they realized that, oh, wait a minute, this isn't just the staff at the department saying it. These are the volunteers who serve on our boards. We managed to get a unanimous resolution from every board, but we really think one of the keys to it was this board's the respect that General Assembly members have with regard to this board, how you operate and what you do. So we greatly appreciate that. I think the only other most significant legislation we worked on for you guys was the changing the fees, giving you flexibility to set the fees. That seems like an age ago, but that was really half a year ago. But the General Assembly just ended its business for the year on Monday. They will come back on the 10th if there are any vetoes from the work they did last week. They'll return on the 30th. Really, after the first of the year, they're not going to have. They'll have pro forma sessions until sometime early in January. At that point, there are only 10 bills that are up for consideration that are not, that they're not taking up new policy matters, or 10 bills that are in conference committees that are eligible to be considered. They're also eligible to consider redistricting lawsuits, response to other lawsuits, or constitutional amendments that could come up. But that's it for the General Assembly for this year until they have a short session. They have not announced when that will be. Typically, it's after the primary election, since there are still a couple of lawsuits on redistricting that can put some uncertainty into the primary season. We don't know when there's uncertainty when the primary will be. They typically have the session after the primary. Right now, it's scheduled for early March. If that doesn't change, they'll probably be back in April and May. The good news for them this year is the only good news out of waiting 6 months to complete a state budget is that there's not a lot they have to do for the second year of the 2-year budget or change. They don't have all the info they need to set rates and health plan premiums and all these things for the second year, but they did have all that information at the point they set the budget. So there's sort of a less urgency for budget revisions next year. Just from the get-go. Obviously, people want some desire to make some changes to it. So it may actually be a very short session next year. So they can be flexible as to when they have it too. But with that, I'm happy to take any questions anyone might be about the legislature, what happened in the legislature generally, or on our stuff.
This is Melinda. Sam, do you see or anticipate any movement toward an independent commission going forward, either by initiative or referendum or whatever, to solve the redistricting continual lawsuit activity we've been going through?
I think that's an effort that's continued to build. A lot of folks are very, very much interested in pursuing or looking at it, but I don't think it's quite right in terms of having momentum to go through the legislature in the current session. They've probably ready for another round of redistricting lawsuits.
Okay.
Before they're willing to rethink that.
Thank you.
Fortunate thing regarding that question is that Democrats and Republicans voted for this budget. Republican legislature, Democratic governor, and us being able to get our full funding for our retirement system, for our state health plan, to be reimbursed for our $200 million of COVID-related activities, to the money that was taken out of the health plan last year, as well as for the first time putting money toward our unfunded healthcare liabilities in terms of our solvency fund. Those were big wins for us. So that's a big enough yoga mat for us to focus on without getting involved in the other. So, thank you. Other questions from the phone for Sam? And for the new board members, it's important to know that you know how I feel about retirement readiness and people having control of their own destiny. I've never thought as part of our yoga mat to take on 401 and 457 administrative responsibilities for private businesses, which is an initiative that's gone on in other parts of the country. Anything along those lines, I know it doesn't affect us, anything along those lines pass.
It's called the North Carolina Work and Save program, and it's a state operated contribution plan for small businesses that aren't able to access other based retirement systems. It was included in the House version of the budget, but did not make it into the budget conference between the chambers. So it never went over to the proposal in the governor's office. It was slated in this version of the bill, it's come up for a couple of years now, to be housed under the Department of Commerce. Some versions of it in the past have had it operated by the Department of State Treasury. We think actually the Commerce was a better fit for it. You would think that since we have retirement systems here, that it would fit naturally here, but since it's not clear to us that we're even going to be under the same regulatory scheme. And until there's clarity from Washington on the regulations as to whether it's an ERISA or not an ERISA plan, it really was better completely separate from the systems we have. Because if it ends up as an ERISA plan, you're going to have a separate board. You couldn't tuck it under one of our existing boards. And I think how many treasurers on 36 boards now? Is that roughly?
We're to a meeting right now while I'm sitting here.
And so we've got,
Including a little one like the State Board of Education.
we got to get priority straight. So it's an effort that we monitor. Would have had an appointment on that board had the provision gone forward. So we would have had to input. We would have had input on.
Thank you. Anything else? All right. Now turn it over to Scooter Man, Jeff Hancock.
Well,
You're not
thank you,
calling that a motorcycle, are you?
well, it's the best I can do on short notice.
Maybe Santa Claus will bring you a real motorcycle.
Before I jump into topics on the agenda, I did want to introduce to the board our newest member of the Supplemental Retirement Plans team, Kristen Merrick. Joined us mid-month last month, and so she's been with us just now for a couple of weeks, filling the financial operations analyst role that was vacated by Rekha Krishnan. So welcome to your first board meeting, Kristen.
Yeah.
All right. So the first thing I wanted to touch base on, and as Sam noted, and as we mentioned in the last board meeting, the GA passed into legislation House Bill 168, which gives us the ability to adopt a fee different than what we had in the past. So it gives us a little bit more flexibility within certain limits. Before it was either zero or a fee holiday or the 2.5 basis points. We now have the flexibility to propose a fee somewhere in between. And so we have performed an analysis of our expense accounts. We have about $5.6 million in there, which represents a little bit more than 2 years worth of expenses. If you look at our 2021 run rate, and while we don't have a formal target set for where those expense reserves should be, staff feels that 12 months is a adequate reserve level. So with that said, the staff would recommend that we cut the fee in half from where it is today. So from 2.5 basis points down to 1.25 basis points for 2022 and moving forward. We did stress test that level with a 10 as well as a 20% market decline, and it certainly held up well. What we will do is on an annual basis, we will, evaluate where our target reserves are, and if we need to make adjustments, we can. But setting it at this level will allow us to slowly spend down from 2 years worth of expenses and move towards that 12 months worth of expenses while having a lower fee for all of our members. So that's what that we would propose. This is, only impacts the 401k and the 457. We did exclude the 403b based on its small size and its small amount of expense reserves. So what we propose in terms of the 1.25 only impacts the 401k and the 457. So let me stop there and see if there's any questions from anyone in the room or anyone on the phone.
Melinda here. Do you see just reviewing this once a year, or can you foresee the possibility of any crisis type reaction that we might have to make outside of the end of the year budget?
Yep. So at this point, we are looking at just doing a review once a year, again, because we did stress test this using a 10 and a 20% market decline. We have several years worth at this rate. So we feel very comfortable that we would not have to review this, initially within the next year based on any kind of market crisis.
Thank you.
Jeff, can you just summarize, just for education purposes, is this fee assessed like once a year at a given date on the financial level in an individual's portfolio, or is it based on transactions, or both?
So the fee is actually accrued on a daily basis as part of our overall operating expenses from the investments. So along with the custody expense, our expense is accrued on a daily basis. We then take and we move those monies out and into our stable value fund, where we hold those monies on a monthly basis. And then as we need to, we transfer money out of those accounts into our bank account to pay our expenses.
In terms of the participant, that comes out once a quarter.
Well, it's accrued every day in terms of the net asset value that's calculated. So it's accrued through that process.
That's different, I guess, don't we see a fee on our statement?
That's for the record keeping portion of the fee. That's the $26 a year.
Yes. And that's taken out quarterly.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was getting.
Thank you.
All right. Any further questions? And just for the new board members, previously the law said we can either not charge any, or we had to charge 2.5 basis points. It just didn't give us the flexibility to do anything in between. So this is the flexibility we have. This is the staff's recommendation, which has been stress tested. And I highly recommend it. Would entertain a motion to approve.
Tisha Bella Thomas, I move that we accept the recommendation.
Thanks, Shabella. Who was the second?
Jim Lumsden, I'll second it.
Hey, Jim, thank you. Motion and second being made. Any further discussion? And this could not have happened but for Sam Watts, General Assembly, Governor signing the legislation, as well as staff who put us in this position. So motion and second, no further discussion. Clerk, call roll.
Okay, Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Linda Barrett.
Aye.
Michael Lewis.
Aye.
Nels Roseland.
Aye.
Steve Bean.
Aye.
And Wyndon Hibbler.
Aye.
I do also want to mention that with that, so we have to post the new fee on our public site for 30 days. And so we will do that, and that would give the public time to make any comments that they may have. We will provide any comments that we receive back to the board. We'll place the rule on the 2022 Q1 meeting agenda for adoption by the board, and then take any other steps that we need to comply. Anything you might want to add to that, Reed?
That process is under the new statute
Sam mentioned, essentially mirrors the Administrative Procedures Act, except it makes it more flexible, more board driven. But there will be a 30-day posting, comment period, final adoption at the Q1 meeting, and then it will be effective presumably the month after that. So I guess March 1. Okay. The next topic we have is the review of the North Carolina 403B plan. At the last board meeting, the board asked that the SRP staff perform a review of the program. We did provide that detailed review to the board in advance of today's meeting, so I'm going to summarize what our observations are, and then I'll open it up for comments and any questions that anyone may have. At the last board meeting, Mr. Roseland, you had asked about the background and the history and the expected growth of the program. So the program was created in 2014 to provide a.
Let me interrupt. One of the board members contacted me and said they can only hear the audio but can't see the video from the meeting. Has there been a format change or? Right. I don't want to say who it was. First name was Steve. See if you can reach him. Thank you.
So as I was saying, the program was created back in 2014. What the state really wanted to do was to provide a low-cost, high-quality option to what our teachers had already, along with the oversight from the Department of State Treasurer that the 401k and the 457 have. In terms of the growth, certainly the growth has fallen short of what the expectation was. As of today, there's only about 1,400 accounts and about $30 million in assets. As we noted in the materials, the 403B program faces internal competition from our own plans, the 401k and the 457. If you look at the numbers, there's 173 entities that are eligible to offer the 403B program. Only 94 have done so. But out of those 173, all of them offer the 401k and 141 of them offer the 457.
Let's go back over that one more time.
So out of the 100,
This is the universe.
this is the universe, the 173 that are eligible to offer the 403B program. Only 94 have chosen to do so.
Any 403 or ours?
Ours.
And that 173 is mainly made up of LEAs.
Excuse me?
That 173 is mainly made up of LEAs, local school systems.
Yes.
Okay, so 173 eligible, 113 of those are LEAs. And then 94 are offering our 403.
That's correct. And again, as out of those 173, all of them offer the 401k and 141 offer the 457. So you can see from that, the 401k and the 457 appear to be more popular with them. And among the employers who offer the 403B, so out of those 94, when we look at the rates of participation, we have less than 0.5% of participation rate in the 403B, as compared to 16% in the 401k and 4% in the 457. Enrollments, you kind of tell the same story. We see more enrollments in the 401k and in the 457 than we do in the NC 403B. Yeah, in terms of external competition, almost half of the 94 from employers offer other 403B programs. And we did include a couple of examples within the slide deck to show what that looks like. So you can see, and it's the sample, Patty, would be a few slides down. If you go down to external challenges, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Keep going to the external. Go one more. So this was the first example, which was Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. You can see these are all of the 403B programs that they offer. You can see there on the list, there's about 7 or 8 different investment platforms. We're simply just one of those investment platforms. We also included another example on the next slide from Union County Schools, where again, we are simply just one of about 10 options that these folks have to choose from. So not only do we face internal competition from our own plans, but we have external competition from many other providers in the industry that compete for our eligible employees. Other factors are, based on the size of the program, the fees are higher than what we see in the 401k and the 457. The fee is 5 basis points. So based on the fee that we just approved at 1 1/4, it's 4 times as high. Additionally, when you have an employer that makes multiple options like this available, they employ a TPA to help them manage it. The TPA also has a fee, so there's another fee layered on in addition to the record keeping fee. So you can see, all around, the NC 403B is our most expensive option that we can offer. In terms of staff time, it's not a lot, but there is some staff time that is dedicated to handling the plan.
And what would you call the fact that you're forced to invest in high cost mutual funds? Would that be an internal or external?
So by law, a 403B cannot invest in separately managed accounts. So they don't have a choice but to invest in mutual funds, and typically those carry a higher expense ratio than what we would see on our separately managed account.
Which is not even a part of what you've said so far.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So really, when we looked at this, we saw there was really two options that we felt were viable options. And of course, the first option was is to do nothing at all, remain status quo. The pro to doing that, we do have a high quality, low cost program, although it is the smallest of the 3. It still would allow for folks to elect a plan or a program to program transfer from one of the higher cost options, although we really don't see that being leveraged much at all. The cons to keeping the program is, this plan remains the 3rd choice, amongst our participants. We think, offering 3 plans creates a little bit of confusion. It may actually lead to a little bit of inaction by folks. Certainly with our partners at PRU, when they're out in the field with the education counselors, they're trying to promote all 3 plans. So there's a little bit of conflict there that they're trying to deal with as they're trying to promote those 3 plans. And again, acting under the duty of loyalty and care, if you were to want to recommend one of these, you would certainly want to look at the lower cost option that you have out there. The other option would be for us to discontinue the program. If we were to do that, that would allow the staff and our partners at Pru to really focus on the value proposition of the 401k and the 457. We feel like that would reduce some of the confusion that is out there, and certainly would allow our education council resources to be a lot more focused in what they are out there delivering. The downside to discontinuing the program is it does remove the low cost best in class option. It likely impacts teachers who are focused on the 403B market. And for certain schools, it may create some discontent and some unforeseen political risk and how it could impact the other plans. We did, as part of the slide deck, include potential timeline that could be used in terms of discontinuing the program. So something that we certainly have thought about, and thought about what it would take to go down that path. So at this point in time, I'll pause there and let me open it up for any questions that folks may have that are in the room or are on the phone.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Melinda. Okay. When we set it up back in 2014, I was very much in favor of opening the 403B program because I personally did that business when I was an active financial advisor and worked with a school, and it was essentially a very political process because all of the other potential 403B and actual 403B providers in school districts have a very personal, I'm the guy at home relationship.
Former employee, former coworker.
Former coworkers, right. But the reason we opened it up was because all of us very clearly recognized that the teachers were not being served well under a 403B program. And so we said, why not? And we opened it and started trying it and paid close attention, but there was it was an uphill climb to get the school boards to approve it, get inside the administrative building, sit down and chat. And I think most of the administrators said, we do business with the state, okay, open up the program and see what happens. And as a result, not much has happened over those 7 years. However, there's 1,410 accounts. My recommendation now is to survey those 1,410 account holders, outline to them, that the board is considering this. We recognize that that this program costs more than 401k and 457. Survey them and say, would you like to have access to the full panoply that the state offers its 401k and 457 accounts? And if you do this, internal costs will go down for you by 4.75 basis points, right? And you would be better served. I think the upside of doing this would be to have 1,410 folks out there do this, and if we can set up an internal conversion so we can move their 403B account into a 401k or 457, whichever they choose, do it internally automatically, so they don't have any hassle. All they have to do is just sign a letter, please transfer, whatever it is we require. And continue to fulfill our fiduciary responsibility to these participants by offering them the highest and best program that's already available to everybody else.
So let me speak to your last point. So it's not as easy as that. Because as a school district, they offer a 403B plan. And a lot of them offer multiple investments. That plan that we are just one of. So for some of those 1,410 teachers, if their school board decides to maintain their 403B plan with the other investment programs, they can't move that money into our 401k or 457 because they have not had an event that would allow them to do that. So for those whose entity decides to maintain their 403B plan, they can move to one of the other 403 investment programs. Now for those entities who say, you know what, I'm going to terminate my plan, that then creates the event that is necessary for someone to be eligible to transfer into our 401k or 457. So it's just not as easy as that. It's going to depend on what the employer entity decides to do with the 403B plan that they sponsor.
So may I add something? So if Charlotte-Mecklenburg, given that explanation, got the news that we're freezing the plan, phasing it out, they sent a letter saying, we want to terminate our 403B relationship with the state of North Carolina, then that would be a triggering event to make this more seamless.
So, so Charlotte-Mecklenburg, because they offer seven other investment platforms, if they terminate our piece of that, they still maintain a 403B plan with other investment platforms. So they have not created an event in which people could pull money out of that. They would have to terminate the overall 403B plan that they sponsor in order to create that event. So for those employers that are in this multiple offering situation like Charlotte-Mecklenburg, Union County, it's a little bit more complex because we're just one investment platform out of many.
Question, does Charlotte-Mecklenburg offer our 401k and 457
All of them do.
to all of the school districts and so forth?
All 173 employers offer our 401k and 141 of them offer our 457.
Okay, well, what is to stop a teacher to say, I want to roll over my individual 403B account balance into the state's 401k?
You have to have
IRS.
a distributable event to be able to roll that over. You have to terminate employment. You have to have your employer terminate the plan. You have to have some IRS event that makes you eligible to roll it over. Now they can say, I'm going to stop deferring in the 403B, not put any more money there, and now I'm going to defer in the 401k. But they still have that balance in that plan if the employer maintains that plan.
Or they can roll it over into one of the other 6 plans.
Or they can roll it over to one of the other 403B providers that are made available by their employer.
And we have not fulfilled our fiduciary responsibility by sheltering them from higher cost, higher hassle, higher and worse service.
That was one of the cons that I mentioned is if we discontinue the program for some of them, we do get rid of what we view as the best in class low cost option.
So Jeff, related to option 2, Mr. Treasurer, if I may, if I'm a Charlotte-Mecklenburg teacher and I've got money in the North Carolina 403, my default is to simply transfer to one of the other 6 vendors that balance. There's not a legal option unless the school system says all 7 are closing down to easily or legally transfer it to our other 2 state products.
That's correct. Because
Okay.
again, you have to have that IRS event that makes you eligible to distribute that balance. And if they are maintaining the overall plan, just getting rid of one of the investment platforms, that does not create that event.
So even if our board's not contemplating this transition, I don't have the flexibility if I'm a Charlotte teacher to simply say, you know what, just North Carolina 401ks got a broader set of investment products, better fees, et cetera. I can't just say a standard transfer that's not available to me. Okay.
Nope.
That's
Call the
unfortunate.
IRS.
Because that balance is in the 403B plan. Now, they could stop putting more money there and put their new money
Gotcha.
into the 401K, but that balance is going to remain in that 403B plan until they have a distributable event.
And I want to be clear in my mind that what we're discussing right now is a freezing of this plan to start with. And by these great questions that we've gotten, and looking on Jeff's face, there's probably a couple more questions, unintended consequence when you look around the corner to make sure that we've looked at all these permutations. But right now, we're just talking about freezing the plan.
I've got a question.
And then we'll talk about the other part later. And just let me get to your question. Go ahead, Steve.
This is Steve Beam. Back to that question on the 403B, if one were to transfer from one 403B plan to another, is there a penalty or cost associated with that at the individual participant level?
Is there a termination fee? If somebody were to do that, would they be charged a termination fee by us?
Or transfer?
Or transfer fee?
Or would they be charged by the other provider or any, with moving from one provider to another within the 403B, does that trigger some type of cost?
We're going to write that question down. Our hardened instinct is no, that anybody who's getting more assets is not going to charge people for giving them more assets. And I would just go way out on a limb here to say if there was any way, shape, or form, a transfer, an exit, or termination fee from our standpoint, that our plan should absorb that.
Okay, thanks. I do have another question or comment in a moment.
You got it. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, I've looked at this and thought about it, and I would, Melinda, I beg to differ with you a little. I don't think asking the 410 participants or 1,410 account holders and surveying would be a good idea, because you're probably going to get a very mixed reaction anyway. My general feeling is this has not worked out as it was planned, and it's not scalable because of the restrictions and the other issues, and it's doubtful we'll ever be able to achieve the type scale with the 401k or the 457. My inclination is very much to look at option 2 and figure out how to discontinue without penalizing any of the participants specifically.
This is Jim. I would tend to back that up, Steve.
Go ahead, Jim.
I was going to agree with Steve. The odds of, these relationships that build accounts and all these places. They're pretty deeply ingrained. I mean, freezing and moving over makes more sense, but this program is not going to get the scale. I mean, for reasons that are political and commercial and personal. I've always thought it's probably something we should look at, and I am troubled by the fact that we're pulling out the lowest cost option, but our share is so low. In the end, it isn't really, the administration of it. I bet if you allocated it out, would be pretty expensive. But it's an interesting question. But I think I would be in favor of phasing it out if possible.
Thank you. I'd like to add a comment. I'm Alan Jakewith. Before coming to work for the state, I worked for one of these providers, and I was in a financial planning role, and I saw all of these providers, and their default, they were pushing an annuity with a 10 or 12 year lockup and a 10 or 12 year, and a 10 or 12% fee if you were to get out of that. So yes, there's no fee to get in, but there was definitely, these were extremely expensive options that were provided to these people in the 403B plan.
Like Hotel California.
You can get in anytime, but you can never leave.
Check out, but check out or leave.
Right, you check out, you can never leave, yes.
This is Melinda. I saw 14-year surrender penalties. I mean, it was financially obscene, to be perfectly honest.
And I've always said, Jim, to your point and to Steve's earlier point and to Melinda's earlier point, what I'd like to see us do is to think through some of the new questions that have come up. Look around some more corners. Instead of the survey, measure 4 times and cut once in terms of the process that somebody would need to go through if we decide to do this, and put all the energy into that communication piece about how to make it seamless for them. The thing I think I've said in a previous meeting is that in business, it's hard to be as smart as what Warren Buffett said. I'll just repeat him so I don't get blamed for this. It's hard to be as smart as your dumbest competitor. And as I've said, if Jerry's Hot Dogs guy wins the lottery and he's always wanted to be in the hot dog business and he just wants to sell hot dogs for 10 cents, he opens up a hot dog place beside Snoopy's, he's going to sell a lot of 10-cent hot dogs. It's really hard in business to be as smart as your dumbest competitor, according to Warren Buffett. And when we have these internal and external constraints that prevent us from ever being great at this, that's what's led us to this conversation. It's not any of us really desired. I mean, obviously, I've been looking at this for 4 years. I just didn't snap at this. But it's just there's no progress being made. And I think if we can look around the corner, take the comments from the board, look at the unintended consequences, and figure out how to make this as seamless as possible, I think that would be the best value, because we'll never be as smart as somebody who's offering a 10%, has an annuity with a 10%, 10-year lockup, a 10% back-end fee, who possibly, I don't have any knowledge of this, maybe offering TVs or donuts or trips or whatever to get the business. We can never compete against that. So any other comments or questions from the board?
Question, and this is a legal question. Would it be worth our while to try to get an IRS ruling to enable us to do a rollover from 403B into our 401k? Chester, North Carolina?
In the interim between this meeting and the first quarter meeting, we could run that by outside council and see if that's an option.
Would that solve our problem? If we had the ruling saying we could do it?
If we had a private letter ruling, that would certainly be in our favor.
Okay. I would recommend we try it.
And let me go out on a limb.
Yeah, I don't have as much experience with this. Does the IRS on occasion grant exceptions in that nature?
They are.
I love the idea they're realistic. I'm just asking.
They are. It's rare.
Yeah,
It's the best way of saying it.
I've never seen one.
Yeah, but there have been, and somebody in the room can correct me, there have been legislative attempts through Congress to modify, modernize, upgrade all these 403B rules. And maybe that's embedded in one of those somewhere that has always been in the oven. But anyway, as I said, this is not something I desire to do. I've been looking at this for 4 years, and it's just, I think we need to focus on those things we can be great at. And, you know, all the energy, for example, just in the last hour that we've spent on this subject, we have a 50% difference between the people in our local system who participate in 401s and 457s and the same public service employee who works in the state system. 50% difference just in the participation rate of people who are trying to prepare for their retirement readiness. I mean, that's where I'd love to spend our energy. I'd love to spend our energy on not losing assets at the end of the game because they can't do it cheaper, better elsewhere. And I'd like to spend our energy on closing that gap between our state employees and our local employees.
Mr. Treasurer, I know this is a path that may have some landmines, but given Sam's earlier briefing about the success of common sense changes with the legislature on your entire portfolio to oversee, this discussion, Alan's comments, others, the annuities and the penalties to withdraw or pull out, to me is quite alarming.
You didn't say the word you want to say.
This board, in terms of an advocacy position, encouraging the General Assembly to find some way to prohibit, minimize, dampen that. I'm not sure what the legislative language would be to the state 403B the authority provided in statute. But I do think a brighter light by the appropriate form, whatever form, on that practice and how it harms overstressed, overworked local folks needs more attention at whatever form would be willing to provide that.
That's a great point. And every week, I guess, or every month, Christopher, we receive Pensions and Investments, the trade magazine. And there's lots of articles in there about these issues that Alan brought up. And so there'll be, 5 articles, and then sometime there'll be a little article about somebody who got their butt sued off over this stuff and they lost. But it's still not changed the behavior of of what's happening. So that's my impression of this. So, all right. Any other comments or concerns or questions from the board?
Yes, this is Wyndon. A couple of things. One, from a historical standpoint, on the 2 slides where you outline the example of external challenges, can we actually put on there that our 403 plan is one of whatever, and that we're competing with these other, because those 2 slides doesn't really speak to that. It just lists what they are. The second thing was I was looking at the timeline where you were talking about when things would freeze, and I was wondering, I was trying to figure out why was the program frozen to new contributions so late into the year, and then finally I was thinking what I'm hearing is that while we tried to do something that we thought was beneficial for our members, that it didn't work out that way. And I'm kind of leaning towards this side of, if we know that it doesn't work for us, for our members, we just have to exit that strategy. That's just my thinking. But how do we do it? I think if we just killed our 403 plan, it gives them the option to roll over to another 403 plan, and we'll lose that money. Is basically what would happen. Is that correct?
We will, you heard Wyndham's comments, so we will incorporate, thank you for those comments and suggestions. We'll incorporate all that into, before we meet next time, number one. And then anybody on the board who has any additional comments or corners we should look around or think, as they think about unintended consequences, don't hesitate to reach out to us also.
So are we not making any decision today?
Is there a vote before us today on this?
It's at the board's discretion how they'd like to proceed.
Let's go back to Wyndham's comment about the freeze date is when.
So I think he was asking about why is the freeze date so late in the year in terms of new contributions. The thought was, as we notify these employers that the plan is going away, it allows some time for, if they want to engage a new program provider as part of the 403B plan, or it gives people time to assess the other options while still being able to contribute, and then also getting the teachers through the school year.
Okay.
So we were trying to be thoughtful through that process, and allowing folks the right time to evaluate what their options were, so they can make the best decision and not under the gun.
Wyndham, does that help?
Yeah, I'm seeing 3 different freeze dates, and that's why I was asking. January, you're freezing to participants by new employees and new employees. And then in July, you're freezing to new participants. And I was wondering what was the difference between those 2 things. And then on August 1st, you new contributions. So it seemed like for 8 months, people will continue to contribute to something that will eventually, where they possibly can already have another option, but or decide early on to change that. So
the January date was to basically not allow any new employers to adopt the plan, and then anyone hired.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you there. So when's the last time we had one of those?
We had one last month.
Yeah, we've had 3 this year. 3, okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead. All right.
And then people hired after that date, we would preclude them from joining the plan because of the near-term discontinuance. Then for people who were already employed, not allow them to join after 7/1. So that would be an existing person wanting to join the program, and that's something we can certainly look at. But in terms of new contributions, again, we wanted to try to get the teachers through the school year and give them ample time to evaluate what the other options are within the plan, so that they can make the best and informed decision with what to do with their monies.
So we need to make a decision on this today in order to keep this deadline, correct?
Well, again, this is just a possible timeline. We need to go back over this next few months, and as the treasurer put it, look around other corners and look at things. We can certainly adjust this accordingly. Certainly, we don't want to take any missteps. We want to be sure that if this is the board's decision that we're doing it with our eyes wide open.
Right. And I think my thinking is that if this is option 2 is the path that we go down, it appears that it really won't be discontinued till for a year. And how do we make sure that we're not putting our members in a situation where they're contributing to something that's not going to be active after a year? And you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, and then again, that's why we would again, if we were to adhere to this timeline, we would very late this year get out a notice of the program of discontinuance. So we would be getting out that communication piece that outlines this, and so folks would be aware that the program would be going away, but again, allowing them ample time to evaluate their options and make the best decision for themselves.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So you don't have a vote on my agenda?
The board can, I mean, the board can
It's on
vote,
here, right?
but it's not on necessarily on the agenda, but the board can put it on. Not knowing which way the board
We
would
didn't know
go,
what, we didn't know what the
put it.
board's, what the board would want to do. Again, like you say, if the board wants to, have some further evaluation or review of certain items, you're talking with outside counsel about a private letter ruling or other items.
But I would just add that, Mike, if we don't, I think the timeline is reasonable. I think that a lot of these questions that have come up, there's going to be time within this time, built into this timeline to actually deal with these. So if we need to make any adjustments to what the board may vote on today, that we'll have the opportunity to do so.
And that's fair.
And I'm comfortable, if I'm allowed to, make a motion to accept staff's recommendation on option 2.
Steve, I'll second that.
Got a motion, a second, with the caveat that we'll continue to work on all these topics that we previously discussed. The thing we didn't bring up is what are some of the advantages of the 401 that the 403 doesn't have, aside from all these other things that could make it more virtuous for somebody to have those. And I don't know what they are, the state tax, or I think there are differences. So, motion, second, any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk will call the roll.
Okay. Shavella Thomas,
Aye.
James Lunston,
Aye.
Melinda Barron,
Aye.
Michael Lewis,
Aye.
Nels Roseland,
Aye.
and Wyndon Hibbler.
Aye.
Did it? Thank you, board members. I know that, as I've said repeatedly, it's not a place we would want to be, but I think we're doing the right thing, and you should be excited about what we can do to close the gap between the participation in the 401 and the 457 between our state and our local employees, because we have that data. It is a 50% difference, not 50, 40 to 60%. The one's about a 40% participation, that one's about a 60%. That's what I mean by 50%. Not 20 and 70. And then continue to work on keeping money from leaving the plan at the end of the person's tenure. Okay, legal matters.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Chad.
You have a minor correction in the contribution accelerator provision and 401k plan document. It's a retroactive amendment. The contribution accelerator is intended to operate only on a percentage, 1 percentage point increase up to 8%. An employee can opt into it. Actually, it's double opt-in. The employer has to opt into the feature, and then the employee has to opt into the feature. But it's intended that you can automatically increase on an annual basis by 1 percentage point your deferral rate. Prudential implemented permitted deferral rates of less than 1 percentage point. This didn't affect just North Carolina; it affected other customers. And so, as part of that, Prudential pursued a voluntary correction program filing with the IRS. North Carolina was part of that. Fortunately, we had only one participant who was affected for only 8 payrolls in 2020 for less than $1,500. So it was very minor from North Carolina's perspective. The IRS approved the correction, and the 2 requirements are to revise the plan document retroactively to permit this less than a percentage point increase in the deferral rate using contribution accelerator, and then to notify any affected participants and essentially round them down if they don't respond. That does not affect the 1 participant. And this is, and then there's the minor updates just to correct the correct participant to the term member, by term plan document. Are there any questions about that?
No questions. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved, Melinda.
I'll second it, Nels.
Thank you, Nels. Motion second being made. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Shavella Thomas.
Aye.
James Lunston.
Aye.
Michael Lewis.
Aye.
Steve Bean.
Aye.
And Wyndon Hibbler.
Aye.
Thank you all. Now to item 7, 8, retirement plans update. A little bit behind schedule. I take responsibility for that.
We'll try to see if we can be a little pithy and help get you back on schedule, Mr. Treasurer.
You have to fly westbound and get back on schedule.
All right, first and foremost, thanks everyone for your time today. Mike McCann, joined by Matt Herman. What we'd like to do today is provide an update on the transaction with Empower, metrics from our Q3 report, and then also then turn it over to Matt to share some of the great work going on with the 18 dedicated counselors in the field. Before I start today, just wanted to share at the last board meeting, you gave us the contract extension until 12/31/2023. Just wanted to share, partnering with Jeff and Reed, that amendment has been executed, and we proactively took our lower fee with the last quarterly fee that we took in early October. So that new lower fee has already been taken. In terms of the sale transaction with Empower, all of that continues to look like that will close sometime in the first quarter. All the regulatory approvals are ongoing as we speak. And the big update for today is that I wanted to happily share that everyone that services your plan has been offered a job with Empower and has accepted a position with Empower. So the current and existing service team will all continue on, and we're very happy to share that news. Between now and the close, we'll continue to provide updates, and then we continue to have the webinars. We had our last webinar, I think it was on November 15th, that showed some of the technology and the participant experience lift when we transition those plans over to Empower's record keeping platform. In terms of the update for today, I'd like to start on page 5 of our report. really good metrics in terms of how things look at the high level in terms of contributions versus distributions, average participant balance, active participation rate, and then active employee deferral rate. We had a slight drop in, if you look at the lower right-hand corner, in active average employee deferral, the monthly deferral rate. We had a slight drop in September, but that quickly popped back up in October. We're actually above 230 for the first time ever in history in terms of the average monthly deferral rate. On page 6, $230. On page 6, total unique participants with the balance that continues to increase. Goalmaker participation rates remain healthy. The number of new loans holds pretty steady overall from what we've seen over the last, not just the past 13 months, but going back even further. And then total enrollments. I'm not going to take Matt's thunder, but in October we had the best month of enrollments dating all the way back to, I believe, 2017. If I'm not mistaken, 2015. So enrollment activity is getting back to pre-pandemic levels. I think a lot of what Zora spoke on earlier with the campaign around National Save Month and those activities, along with driving people to a lot of the virtual webinars, plus our online enrollment tool. We've got a lot of good momentum at our backs right now in terms of what we're doing enrollment-wise. On page 7, we have our combined goals summaries, and everything there looks extremely healthy as well above both our overall contractual goals and the stretch goals that we set several years back. And the big note here in terms of slide 7 that we also report out on, so far this year, 24 new employer adoptions, 4 of those being with the 401k plan, 19 being with the 457. And then through September 30, there was 1 new 403b. We've added 2 additional since then, so we're at 3 total. But then a lot of the other ones that are also very meaningful, 9 new employers adopted Contribution Accelerator, and then 31 employers have either added, changed, or enhanced their employer contribution program. So that continues to be a huge indicator for us. If you've got one of those subplans that offers some type of an employer contribution, the participation rate in that subplan is just so much higher than those that do not. So all good continued tailwinds there as well. We'll next move to slide 12. Focus on just the 401k plan on slide 12 and the 457 plan on slide 13. Slide 12 gives a good snapshot of activity over the last calendar year for the 401k plan in terms of looking first at the change in assets. So assets on 9/30 being about 11.6, assets on 9/30/2021, 1 year later at 13.8, that being over 20% gain. You can see the difference in assets coming in, contributions versus distributions out. So slightly negative there, but overwhelmingly the huge earnings over the last year, which led to that 20.41% gain. And then in the chart down below, you see the nice bump up in terms of members with an account balance, almost a 2% increase, and then the average account balance and median account balance being significantly up. And then the pie chart on the left gives you a good idea in terms of the actively contributing members, the not contributing members, and then the terminated retirement status of those members. The only call out is in that not contributing pie chart, some of those folks could be terminated or retired. It's just like we've long known, some of those sub plans are lax in providing us with that termination date. So we don't know for sure if they're still employed, just not contributing, or if they are in fact terminated. And then on slide 13, the 457 plan. Same similar healthy results there. Total assets have increased from 1.6 to just shy. Now we're at 1.9 billion in assets. Contributions and distributions, slightly outweighing contributions, but earnings more than making up for that for a percentage gain of over 19%. And then you can see members with an account balance down slightly, the average account balance and median account balance being much higher over the last calendar year. The last thing that I want to point out is I want to go to slide 47, which is the new slide that we added a couple quarters back, and the treasurer asked us to start providing line of sight to the board on. And this just goes to looking at that rollover and distribution activity and trying to be really laser focused in terms of trying to answer the treasurer's questions around total percent of assets saved. And that chart at the top of page 47 is looking at that at both the yearly basis over the last calendar year to 9/30 of 2021, and then over the last quarter. And over the last quarter, the percentage of assets saved as we're calculating across this is at 96.3%. And then the two charts below, one looks at just rollovers out, the other looks at just cash distributions. And then down below, the really meaningful part that you wanted us to start reporting out on is just showing by firm where those rollovers are going. So that chart on the bottom left is over the last year, and then that chart on the lower right is over the last quarter, just tracking those rollover outs.
The total, the asset value of distributed is 870 billion.
What was that, Mr. Treasurer?
How much left?
How much left? Counting rollovers and distributions, 870 million.
But just rollover. The distribution could be paying your power bill.
Yeah, just rollovers over the last year, 446 million.
That was less than before.
That is, let's see, I believe I put this down.
Are we making an impact with our marketing? Are we making an impact on this issue?
So we are slightly up in rollover outs from the previous couple of years, but some of that could be because last year there was a bit of a pullback with the whole coronavirus relief, where we saw a lot of folks taking advantage of those programs that expired at the end of last year. So you could be seeing that some folks now that didn't take activity last year are taking activity, but
when you said
rollover outs are up this year over last year for sure.
I'm sorry, I was rude. The total number of dollars is up slightly.
Yep.
But wouldn't the big factor be the number of accounts? I mean, dollars is important, but as you're trying to see if our marketing's working, wouldn't it, the number of accounts leaving us to go with these other firms be a better place to start or not?
Yeah, I agree. I have that detail. I didn't total it up for today, look at the dollar amounts, but I can definitely provide the number of accounts as well.
Because if what we're doing to encourage people to keep their money here forever is not working, we need to do something different.
And so I've been working on some of that. There's something that I want to put in front of you at some point here. But the numbers I've looked at, basically over the last 18 months, we've had about 9,200 people roll money out to a third-party institution, about $600 million. And I think there are some efforts that we can partner with to try to retain some of that we're not doing today.
Okay. But does that have to do with concierge service, does it?
Not in total, but it does have a little bit to do with some of that. But we're taking zero effort today, and we're watching 100% of it walk out the door. I think there are some efforts we can take.
All right.
Any other questions for me before I turn it over to Matt? All right, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Mike.
Good morning, Mr. Treasurer, to the board, staff. Great to be with you today. Hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving.
You can't talk lower than Sam Watts. Not allowed in this room.
I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. Anything you want, but you can talk lower than that.
It's a rule around here.
Well, I think to Mike's point, we looked at some of the data from Q3, and it was a tremendous quarter. We saw some really, really good things going on. I'm going to walk through the engagement we saw in Q3. I'll share some updates. I'll talk about some of the special initiatives. But thank you to you all, because together we engaged nearly 15,000 people during the quarter with some form of live education, whether it's one-on-one, a group meeting, or an event. So those are really, really strong numbers. It comes through in the data that Mike shared. When we look at some of those earlier stats, contribution rates, participation rates, enrollments. It also comes through in the stories we're hearing from people. We meet with a lot of folks. There's 15,000 of them from the last quarter. And I'll walk through some of those updates today. I'm going to spend most of my time on page 52, 53. So I'll start at 52. You'll see there a breakout of the year's education. And I'll draw your attention to Q3. We had 456 group meetings in the third quarter. That's 50% higher than Q3 of 2020. So really good progress there. That's something we spent a lot of time this year doing, and I'll share some examples of that here in a few minutes. 6,137 one-on-one consultations each quarter. That's actually 25% higher than Q3 of 2020. It's actually higher than Q1 2020. I think that's important because that was pre-pandemic. So I think we've come a long way in the last 20 months, both on our end as a team, as well as with employers and employees embracing the tools and the things we offer. We still got work to do, but we're seeing some good results. When you start to peel the quarter back and go a little deeper, you see in the above, July, August, September, each of the metrics we look at on our employee education, whether it's group meetings or one-on-ones or total meeting attendees, we were higher than the peer month the year before. So July 2021, 144 group meetings. It's 122% higher than July of last year. August, 146, 38% higher. September, we had 166 group meetings, which was one of the highest months we've had in the whole pandemic. So really, really good progress there. One-on-ones, we are averaging around 2,000 per month. So we've come a long way even on our one-on-ones. If we go back and look at April, May, June of last year to see the level we were at, we've recovered quite nicely. I'll share some updates here on October as well in a few minutes. But I do want to also point out, we also measure progress, not just on the activity, but we look at the actions that people are taking. Specifically enrollments, if you go to page 53, you'll see, like mentioned earlier, a breakout of enrollments by quarter. So you have a rolling 4-quarter view there, Q4 2020 through Q3 21. We've had 20,136 enrollments over those 4 quarters. So really strong results there. If you look at just the 3 quarters of this year, 15,591 enrollments. We are now approaching near pre-pandemic levels of enrollment based on the trend we've seen in the 3 quarters and some of the results we've seen in October and November. So really strong there. In addition to employees, we're doing education across the state. We have 18 folks out there dedicated, interacting, doing group meetings, doing one-on-ones. But we also serve as relationship managers for the over 1,000 sub-employers out there, cities, counties, municipalities, state agencies, universities, the school systems. So we are actively having discussions with leaders in those various entities every day, and we're seeing them taking action. Mike shared some of it earlier. When you look at the 64 employers that have added things this year, they've actually equated to 90 actions being taken. What are those actions? Adding a plan, an employer contribution program, moving to percentage contributions away from dollars, adding contribution accelerator. So we've seen 90 of those through September. We've seen even more in October, November, and even expect a couple more this month. If you break that down, 24 of those plan adoptions, as Mike mentioned, either 401k, 457, or 403b. We've had 31 employer contribution programs, either added new or enhanced. I think that's a really, really important stat. That's double the rate of employer contributions being set up compared to last year. So we're kind of recovered from that standpoint. I think that speaks volumes to employers and what they're doing, the decisions they're making to add these features, because we know, as Mike mentioned, collectively, these all hands in retirement readiness of folks out there. Special initiatives, I've spoken about a few of these over the last couple quarters. Retiree outreach, we do a lot of webinars for retirees. It's one of our most popular webinars that we offer. Some of those are just about the supplemental plans, but We also partner with Vicki Roberts and her team. We do a pension and a supplemental plan joint session. We're doing those monthly. We did even more in October, but really good progress there. We continue to see very high levels of registration for those meetings. So that tells us there's a need and we want to keep fulfilling it. We are also reaching out to retirees. So each month we get a file that tells us who is retired. We are personally calling each of those retirees. So since we started this program last year, middle of the year, we've made outreach to over 4,000 people now. So that's something near and dear to our hearts. We want to make sure those folks are getting support. To the numbers we just looked at, we talk to people and they still don't know they can stay. So we want to make sure we're rolling our sleeves up and calling those folks. We're doing that in addition to some of our traditional engagements. Technology, we heard earlier online enrollment. That was something that was rolled out a while back. We continue to share that capability. We use that in a lot of our meetings. We are now at about 25% of our enrollments are happening through that new solution. We have some other ways we enroll folks. They could use paper. We've got other forms of technology, but that new enhanced experience is what we continue to promote and communicate. We're seeing the numbers continue to increase there. We are also using texting to initiate enrollments in our meetings, QR codes, and other capability, and always enhancing our virtual platforms and the experiences on virtual. Last special initiative I want to call out is employer education. I know Zora earlier talked about some of the web capabilities, the toolkit that was rolled out earlier this year. Another thing we started doing this year for employers, in addition to our personal calls and consultations with them, we do an employer education webinar. We've done 4 of them for the year. We're doing them quarterly. Each quarter they're a different topic. So we're rotating topics. We have seen really, really good response to those. The last one was on September 30th. We had 400 folks register for that webinar. When you zoom out and you look at all 4 quarters, we've had 758 attendees from our employers, and that represents 420 unique employers. So nearly half of those employers have participated in either one or more of the education sessions. So given the response there, it's something we want to continue.
Melinda here. Do you know who these people are who are sitting in on the webinars? Are they all HR people, or do you see any school superintendents sitting in, the real power decision makers?
Yeah, occasionally you may see that. A lot of the sessions are geared towards, I call them, more of the administrative tools that are available, the resources we have in our home office, our web capabilities of reporting, the tools. So we may see some decision makers, but yes, we do get a list of who participated. I mean, I could go and tell you probably the emails of each of those 758 people. We may have to connect the dots to try to figure out who those people are and what their role is. I would say it's more payroll administrative, but maybe occasionally some decision makers. And some of that's how we promote it. But we have flexibility as we move into next year because we want to expand this program. We could gear some of those things to that audience if the board would like us.
Well, what I was thinking about is now that schools and educators everywhere are having to scramble to fill empty spots and so forth, it seems to me that a webinar to superintendent, assistant superintendents, the folks who actually make the real decisions, and perhaps even district board members, to explain to them how our services are a real positive recruitment factor for them. And if you see that the district has a empty space that they need to fill in order to be able to recruit the best people.
Absolutely, that's a great idea. We do run into that. I mean, I'm shocked that there are a lot of open positions right now. So talent retention and talent acquisition. We have geared some of our sessions towards specific groups like K through 12, but that's a new angle.
Yeah, go for the power folks. They're the ones who can run your numbers even higher, astronomically.
I think tying back to the 403B discussion as well, I think I can see us using some of that to hit on some of those value proposition items.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Take that action.
That's why I'm sitting next to you. I'm going for the power positions.
Yeah.
Lastly, I want to be respectful of your time. The final update I had, cheat a little bit by going into October because this is technically a Q4 update. This is a Q3 meeting, but October, to build on what Mike said, what Zora shared, just a phenomenal. So thank you for your partnership. I know we go back to NACDA and we look at some of the awards and the recognition that tied back to a lot of the activity for that same month last year. And we wanted to build on that. So thank you to Tom and Jeff and Alan and Reed and Zora and Christy. I'm leaving somebody out, but a tremendous month. Over 9,000 education engagements. As Mike mentioned earlier, our highest number of monthly enrollments in a month, going all the way back to July of 2015, 3,000. So just a phenomenal month. One of the special things we did, instead of doing the 1 to 2 normal statewide events, because we do webinars that we open up to anybody to participate, we decided to really ramp that up. We did 11 of those in October. And of those 11, just 11 webinar events, we had 6,600 people registered. 3 of those actually maxed out registration. We maxed out at 1,000. 3 times we hit the 1,000 mark. So people are really hungry for education, for information. We did sessions on retirement. We did sessions on how to navigate our digital tools. We did a session in Spanish. We did a session on market volatility. So really good reception there. So we're also looking at the learnings from October and the great results we had and how to apply that to next year as well. So the combination of that, looking at employers, obviously supporting whatever direction the board decides to take with the 403B. We are here to serve and make sure we're providing support as needed. So thank you for your partnership. Still a little bit of time left in the month, so we're still pretty busy. If you were to look at some of our counselors' calendars, especially in October, literally from like 8 to 6 every day, back-to-back one-on-one appointments and group meetings. We're still pretty busy today as we move towards the next holiday season. So thank you for everything. Looking forward to next year, to our next update.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Merry Christmas. You're heading now? Are you heading now?
Nope, of course, we're going to stick around for the rest of the meeting if that's okay.
It's my problem. Probably not as rare as they used to be. All right, we'll now go to Paul Gellier.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, good morning, Mr. Treasurer, board members, staff, and guests. Thank you for allowing me to present today. We can start off on page 1. I'm going to try to abbreviate my comments given the time constraints. I want to be cognizant of your schedule and agenda. So under section 1, page 1, we highlight the progress made in the sale of Wells Fargo Asset Management, which Galliard is a wholly owned subsidiary of. And a few quick hits include on November 1st, the sale of Wells Fargo Asset Management from Wells Fargo the bank to a consortium of 2 private equity firms, those being GTCR out of Chicago and Reverence Capital out of New York, was completed. Wells Fargo the bank will still have a 9.9% non-voting passive stake, primarily made because of Wells Fargo's distribution channels. Also announced was a retention program for select senior personnel, mainly the investment teams and traders, where they were given an opportunity to purchase equity up to about 20% of the firm, alongside the investors to further align key personnel with the buyers, try to create more skin in the game. Joe Sullivan, as announced at our last meeting, has begun as the new executive chairman of the board of directors and the new CEO of Allspring Global Investments. So the question is, how does this news affect Galliard? The answer is no change. Same brand, same investment team, same investment philosophy and process and executive management, and most importantly, a consistent client and end participant experience. We will be transitioning away from our old phone numbers, but that's the only real change. But our emails will still remain the same. We also look to return to our office in the first quarter of the upcoming year. And finally, the collective trust business is separate from the sale of Wells Fargo Asset Management. And the plan is here that the names for the collective trust will not be changing until a new trustee, a successor trustee, is chosen. The underlying accounts in the state of North Carolina Stable Value Fund are separate accounts. So this really doesn't apply, just kind of putting it out there because there's our flagship Stable Value Commingled Fund is called the Wells Fargo Stable Return Fund. That name will stay in place until we get a new trustee. So any questions on the firm update? Okay.
Continue.
Okay. Moving on to page 3. Just want to look at this where the portfolio statistics as of September 30th. Yep, right there. And the portfolio has provided consistent expected statistics. On the left-hand column, we see that the assets as of September 30th were roughly 2.4 billion. This has grown about 19.3 million since last quarter. If you break down that 19.3 million, 9.3 million came from net inflows from participants, and roughly an equal share, about 10 million, came from interest earnings. Looking at the portfolio characteristics on the lower left-hand column, between June 30th and September 30th, we can see that the average book value wraps financial strength ratings have remained consistent and strong at A+. Same can be said of the underlying quality of bonds that make up the state of North Carolina Stable Value Fund, remained at AA. We still have the same number of contract issuers, and that didn't change from 5. The net blended yield or crediting rate did dip some over the past quarter by roughly 6 basis points, which would be expected as these numbers follow the direction of prevailing interest rates, just on a lag. The underlying yields, however, increased slightly during the quarter from 93 basis points to 1.01%. Again, while that 1.01% appears to be a small number, when looking at comparable alternatives, say money market funds, we would use the 91-day T-bill as a proxy, and that yield was 4 basis points. And in comparison, the 3-year constant maturity treasury was at 53 basis points as of September 30th. So still providing alpha in there. Duration remained pretty consistent since last quarter. And if we look at the market book ratio, while market yields have fallen dramatically over the past couple of years, the blended yield or crediting rate will over time again follow the direction of those interest rates. So we should see that blended yield move a little lower in the coming quarters, all else being equal. But that stable value market to book ratio will help mitigate the impact in the fall in yields, as that 2.89% gain will be amortized in the blended yield over the duration of the fund. And if you did that quick calculation, it'd be about 90 basis points added to the crediting rate per year. Column on the right shows that assets have been pretty consistently growing over the past few years. And again, the portfolio distribution below shows that it remains consistent in the allocations, with a small liquidity buffer that again is used solely for participant transactions in and out of the fund. And again, the portfolio remains fully invested in the fixed income market. If we turn to the next page, page 4, this shows the actual participant returns. And again, strong metrics, from the strong metrics provided on the previous page, we see strong, steady, and consistent long-term stable value outperformance that we were able to provide the North Carolina participants. Now, this page shows, again, what the participant experience was as of September 30th, 2021. Net of all fee performance over the third quarter and over the last year outperformed the benchmark by 30 basis points for the quarter, and more impressively, 161 basis points over the year. If we take a look even longer time frames, 5 and 10 years, again, same story. Net fee outperformance of 79 and 110 basis points. Inception returns, which are about 10 and 3/4 years, same story, 121 basis points of outperformance. One thing to keep in mind in the future quarters is that stable value fund may lag its benchmark, which is a 3-year constant maturity treasury, if there's a material rise in interest rates, but not immediately. And this is due to that book value smoothing of returns in the stable value fund. So, a stable value fund's investment wrap contracts basically protect the end investors from these mark-to-market losses associated with rising interest rates by smoothing the bond portfolio's returns over time. And again, because the contracts smooth the return profile of the underlying bonds, the crediting rate earned by the stable value investors tend to generally track current market rates only with a lag. So as a result, in a rising rate environment, stable value investors gain the benefit of reinvesting at higher rates while being protected from the associated mark-to-market decline from an increase in interest rates. Any questions on this page? Okay, if we flip ahead to the next page, page 5, we see that this shows the historical cash flows. And over the third quarter, 2020, we did see some outflows, in July and August, but they were partially offset by inflows in September. But overall, relatively flat over the quarter, with a slight positive cash flow of about 0.4% or 9.3 million. The message on this page is that the figures here do not appear to be much different than any of our other stable value separate accounts. And, and these flows seem more consistent with the historical flows going back to 2017. If we turn ahead to page 6, we can see, there we go. We can see the historical portfolio characteristics. And again, over the roughly 9 quarters of data shown, we see that the ongoing amortization of the underlying gains show a pretty stable historical net blended yield in the upper left-hand corner. And as mentioned, we would expect this number to drift a bit lower, but again, that 102.89% market to book will help mitigate that decline. The historical duration has been pretty consistent, around 3.25 years. Upper right hand of the page, market to book has recently decreased, again, as the underlying yields have generally decreased over the past 2 quarters. If we look at the next page, page 7, this details the book value wrapper allocation. Again, the allocations have remained very consistent over the past quarter. As mentioned, they do remain investment grade, and all have maintained the same financial strength ratings from a year ago, and are 2 notches above our lowest minimum allowable weighted average rating of A-. So while we didn't see any fee reductions in the third quarter, I'm happy to share that on October 1st, we did have a RAP reduction for Prudential, moving from 16 to 15 basis points. And again, this will be reflected in the fourth quarter report. Again, over the first quarter, we did see a RAP fee reduction from AGL, MetLife, and Nationwide, and there were no changes in the second or third quarters. While we have seen fees coming down, I would guess that the 15 basis points will be the floor for now, as none of our 10 approved RAP providers has gone lower than 15 basis points at this time. Any questions on this page? And just to point out quickly, you might see the MetLife, being at 17 basis points. Well, really, again, this is a separate account GICs, where the others are synthetic GICs. And basically, the separate account insurance, the insurance company's separate account includes the fees of trustee custody fees, which if you compare those to the other RAP providers, and included those fees, they would be on par with the others. So there's no worry there with the MetLife insurance company's separate account fees there. If we flip again to page 11, just want to highlight the fees charged to the Stable Value Fund. There we go. And again, another good message to share that fees have remained pretty consistent over the past quarter with basically no change. They moved from about 29.4 basis points to 29.3 basis points. But if you took a look, from December 31st, 2020 to the end of the first quarter, they did drop roughly a tune of 2.2% or 0.6 basis points when we do omit that 2.5 basis point overlay. So again, it's gone from 27.4 to 26.8. So again, it's a positive number that we'd like to share. And again, the main source of this reduction was from the 3 RAP fee reductions I previously noted from the first quarter. And again, it should move lower in the fourth quarter, as we did see the Prudential RAP coming down. Let's move to page 13. Okay, next page there. Okay, there we go. We see the rolled up total portfolio statistics, and the manager allocation column has not materially changed over the quarter. The external manager allocation has remained near 50% pretty consistently. The high level message here is that the fund is positioned just a bit more conservatively than last quarters, as treasuries have inched up in allocation. But we are seeing we are still actively looking for relative value in the spread sectors as spreads have remained pretty tight in 21. If we turn to the next page, now I'll provide just some high level attribution for performance. We see that the relative performance for the third quarter was mixed, with some managers slightly outperforming their benchmarks and some slightly underperforming, but all within a handful of basis points. That being said, all of the underlying strategies outperformed their benchmarks over all longer time periods measured on this page, specifically the 3 and 5 years and since inception columns. Over the quarter, Galliard has managed their underlying portfolios. Their portfolios slightly underperformed the benchmarks, but again, handful of basis points. Among Galliard and the other external managers, an overweight to spread sectors drove overall returns as they generally outpaced treasuries with similar durations. Allocations to asset-backed securities, agency mortgage-backed securities, and residential mortgage-backed securities were generally beneficial, whereas corporate security selection favoring higher quality issues did underperform lower quality issues. So shorter duration investments were also beneficial to the portfolios as yields did slightly increase over the quarter. No managers significantly out or underperformed for the quarter. As I mentioned, pretty flat. And my final comment is that we have no issues with any of the fixed income investments for the quarter. Are there any questions I can help answer?
Any questions from the board? There are none.
Okay, well, as always, please feel free to reach out with any questions for me, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you. Merry Christmas. Next, we have the folks from Callan, along with Chris Morris.
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
Sure.
Yes.
All right, great. Well, we'll start here as we usually do with the October results. This is just a monthly report meant to offer an update, just given that we're now 2 months into the fourth quarter. But the main thing that I would point out is here on the next page, page 1 of our PDF, is just that the assets stood at around $16.3 billion as of the end of October. This is an increase from $15.7 billion in what was a good month for stocks in October. I will maybe take us to the larger quarterly report and just give a highlight of the market environment here in the third quarter. And this is the first page after this cover page. Thank you. Or after the table of contents, I should say. And just as we look at returns, returns were compressed as there were some concerns about slowing economic growth, supply chain disruptions. There's some inflationary pressure that has reared its head. You'll note that we list the returns for the quarter on this right bar chart in blue. And there were mixed returns for large cap with growth ahead of value, and certainly more negative returns for small cap. You'll note in the green there, the 1 year return below, you see small cap and value leading for the year. So this just highlights is that while, the past, call it 8 of the past 10 years, it has not been beneficial to rebalance. Here more recently, just given some of these whipsaw effects where you see value and growth change leadership and you see large and small change leadership, there has been more of a beneficial relationship associated with more disciplined rebalancing. So it has offered more of a return premium more recently. I did mention some inflationary pressure is some of the cause for compression in returns for the quarter. This is probably the number one question that we are getting from clients right now. We don't really have a crystal ball to know the magnitude and duration of near-term inflation, but we will say this, that long-term inflation is not necessarily a bad thing for stocks. In the short term, sure, it could cause more volatility, and it will likely put pressure on some of these higher, priced growth stocks with, very rich valuation multiples. But, just certainly, not something that we're concerned about long term, as equities tend to respond. In the short term, it's a little bit different, and this is maybe highlighting some of the differences in short term results as well versus long term results. Is there's been a lot of angst from 401k or defined contribution fiduciaries like yourselves as to whether or not you maintain some of these inflation protection options in the plan. And this more recent quarter, as well as I call it the past several months, have offered maybe a little bit of justification for offering these as these inflation bouts have reared their head. So, and we'll point this out as we go through performance. But I will maybe just move us to the next page and just highlight that returns outside the U.S., as we look at non-U.S. returns and developed markets, were also flat for the quarter. It was emerging markets that really struggled, mostly due to China, which you see in that largest negative bar there, was down 18% for the quarter. This is another question we're getting a lot from clients as to what the impact will be and should there be anything done. On fixed income on the next page, we will just highlight that the yield curve was mostly unchanged for the quarter. You did have some credit spreads widen on the margin for some investment grade corporates. And, I think as we look forward, the Federal Reserve Chairman has been fairly vocal over the past few days about, inflation. We need to retire the term transitory, suggesting that, hey, this inflation pressure may remain longer than we originally thought. To the extent that they continue this more hawkish posture than they originally did, that might suggest faster action and maybe some more change in this yield curve. On page 12 of our PDF, which is one more slide, and we'll just talk about the asset values. We'll skip past, yes, thank you. And then talk about the asset values. As I mentioned, roughly 16 billion as of October. As of this quarter end, we stood at 15.74 billion. If you're looking at this and wondering, all right, how much is in Goalmaker? You do have about $7.6 billion in the Goalmaker model portfolios. And what that means is, as you look at this and you say, well, we have a pretty good balance of investments, to where our participants allocate. A lot of that is due in large part to those Goalmaker model portfolios doing their job in the plan. May go to the next slide, page 6. We changed around the order of a few pages in this executive summary, and the rationale was to make it more relevant to the pages that this board covers. For performance, this is what we would consider to be one of the most relevant and important pages, because this is the performance that the participant sees. So in terms of their options, they're able to choose from this lineup, and these are the indices that they're compared against. So this is largely what they see. We will talk a little bit more about the underlying managers, but so long as these options roll up to value added and favorable comparisons, that's what we value most as we evaluate multi-manager options. Just looking at the tier 2 passive offerings, they're doing exactly what you hired them to do, which is track the index at a very low fee. I discussed inflation earlier. As you see from your two inflation options, that would be the TIPS, the Treasury Inflation Protected Securities Fund, as well as the Inflation Responsive Fund, showing better absolute results for the quarter. The TIPS fund, or the TIPS offering, is outperforming the nominal bond offering just above it over the 1 year and 3 year time frame, which is a change from more recent time frames. And then you have the Inflation Responsive Fund, which also includes more commodities and global REITs, as well as TIPS. That's showing favorable results over the 1 and 3 year time frames, and this is more in absolute terms. So as you look at that last year, very favorable relative to equities, and in the last 3 years, again, the absolute return of 8.28 is a favorable return. Moving on down, we're going to talk about your Tier 2 active options. We just heard from Paul at Galliard on the stable value. It continues to rank favorably on a historical basis. If you were to compare the market to book of Galliard versus the market to book of peers, as well as the crediting rate versus the crediting rates of peers, both are right around the peer median, arguably slightly better. So Galliard is doing well. Then as we look at the fixed income fund, over the 1 year and 3 year time frame, outperforming the benchmark, but over the 1 year, something that may catch your eye is, while outperforming by call it 1.8%, they are in the 69th percentile. That is largely due to the more conservative posturing of one of your managers, TCW, but certainly ranks favorably over the 3 year time frame and the top 15%. Large cap equity, this is one that has exhibited exceptional results over the 1 and 3 year time frames, not much to mention there. And then for international equity, maybe a little bit more challenged performance over the 1 year, but head over the 3 and 5 year time frames. You will recall that this is an option where the board did make some changes to the structure of the international equity option by adding 2 international small cap managers. Those changes had not been implemented as of this report's quarter end, so that will the performance will show up in the performance of the fourth quarter end. And then for the small mid cap equity offering, again, some changes made there, but showing some improvement here, certainly over the quarter, and what was a negative quarter for small caps, protected a little bit better, while it just to temper my comments there, it was a modestly negative quarter here for small caps, so still held up better. So good to see that improvement. Still has a way to go to catch up on the 1 and 3 year time frames. And then on the next slide, the next page, we're going to talk a little bit about the underlying managers. We're going to focus more on the highlights just in the interest of time. So we'll skip over the fixed income fund and talk a little bit more through the large cap core offering. If you were to think about these managers and that we show here in a style box context, you would have Sands Capital as your most aggressive growth manager on the right-hand side of growth, and then Hotchkiss and Wiley as your deepest value manager on kind of the left-hand side of that value chart. The managers exhibiting the most extreme style characteristics have been the ones that have seemed to have performed the best over the last 1, 3, 5 year time frames, while those in the middle, which would be Loomis is your more quality growth manager, and then Macquarie, more of the relative value managers, their results look a little less attractive, or they look less attractive relative to the benchmark and to peers. We do think these 2 managers in the middle continue to play a role in the total structure. As I mentioned, at the option level, it continues to perform well. And we do continue to monitor these 2 managers closely. Overall performance is in line with expectations, but for both of them. But it is fair to say that Callan as a firm is a little bit more cautionary on Macquarie, given some of the personnel and organizational changes that have occurred over the last 2 years or so that we've discussed in prior meetings. If there are no questions on large cap core equity, we'll move on to the international equity fund. We show Bailey Gifford and Mondrian. Mondrian being a little bit less cyclically driven and more defensive value. They simply have not kept up with their benchmark. Given their style of management, from our perspective, performance is in line with expectations, and we show them here versus both a growth and a value benchmark, certainly versus the value benchmark over the 3-year time frame looks considerably better. But you know, from our expectations, that Mondrian is certainly meeting their objective. And then finally, the small cap portfolio, all your active managers outperformed for the quarter. That was the driver of the performance. This is, again, one where you made those more recent structural changes, and those appear to be paying off in the near term. Wedge Capital is a manager that remains on your watch list. They do continue to show some improvement. They still have some ground to make up on the index versus the over the 1 year, but rank in the top 40% of managers over that same time frame. So we continue to watch them and expect for them to continue to show improvement. On page 16, or sorry, on the next page, page 9 of our presentation, this is how Callan views a watch list. This isn't your specific watch list criteria. This offers some more opinion and metrics beyond just performance. So we're thinking about the organization, the personnel, the product, as well as performance as we put this together. And this comes largely from our manager research team. And we are comfortable keeping your existing managers on watch. That would be Wedge and Mondrian for performance related reasons. I think we're a little bit more comfortable with both of those managers, given that they do continue to show improvement. And then Galliard on watch for more organizational reasons. And that really, we highlight some of the performance attribution here. I won't go over that, but those are the key points that we wanted to make related to performance for the quarter. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Callan? All right. Chris, you're good.
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
We now have a review of the IPS, right?
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Treasurer. Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Morris. I'm one of the co-chief investment officers for the investments division. Thank you. As Treasurer mentioned at the top of the meeting, I'll be sitting in for the meantime while we look to fill the vacancy left by Lauren's departure. So we're currently recruiting for that position and hope to be making some headway there in the near term, but you may see my face for a little bit until then. So the next agenda item is the investment policy statement annual review for the 401k and 457 plans. Both Callan and staff reviewed the policy and really only have very minor changes to recommend. The policy is in good shape overall. You guys, I believe the board made changes to the international equity fund structure at the last meeting. So that was already completed. And really the only changes that we have is essentially a technical change to the name of the fixed income benchmarks that we have, specifically the removal of the Barclays name for the Bloomberg indices. And just to clarify, the indices are the same. The indices are not changing at all. It's just a strict change for the official name of the benchmark. So you'll see those changes on several of the pages in here. But again, that's really the only recommended change that we have for the policy. Otherwise, it's in good shape. Certainly happy to answer any questions on that, but certainly pretty simple changes.
Any questions? We have recommendation which requires a vote. Read.
That's correct.
Vote required. Do I hear a motion to accept the IPS changes as recommended by Chris Force?
So moved, Steve.
All right, Steve made a motion, second by Belinda. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk will call the roll.
All right, Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Spella Thomas.
Aye.
James Lunston.
Aye.
Michael Lewis.
Aye.
Nels Roseland.
Aye.
And Wyndon Hibbler.
Aye.
Thank you all. We'll next go to Christopher again for plans 401 and 457 update.
Thank you. So the next agenda item is the compliance update for the 401k 457 plans. You'll see there is a memo in your pack regarding that. Again, another quick agenda item. Not a lot to report, which is a good thing when it comes to compliance. With regards to kind of our divestment policies and prohibited holdings, there were no prohibited holdings held in any of the plans, in the group trust or in any of the portfolios. I believe last time we mentioned that BNY Mellon began tracking daily compliance on August 3rd for the latest executive order from the president regarding the communist Chinese military companies. We have had no issues regarding that, and none of our managers were vested in any of these companies during the quarter. No issues to report there, and we continue to monitor that. The only other thing I'll mention is, with the regular investment guidelines, we continue to monitor all of the managers' guidelines on a daily basis, and there were no material issues whatsoever to report for Q3 as well. So not much to report there, which is a good thing. So happy to answer any questions with regards to that.
Good. Thank you. Now the International Fund transition update.
Yes. So as Weston mentioned, and as you guys are well aware, the board approved the hiring of two new managers for the International Equity Fund, Acadian and WCM, to provide some small cap exposure within the NC International Fund. The board also approved the benchmark change for the passive fund to include the small cap piece of that. So going from the MSCI ACWI US fund to the MSCI ACWI US IMI fund. Both of those transitions were completed towards the last half of September and went live essentially August 1st. I'll give you a little bit of detail of what happened. Each new manager for the International Equity Fund, Acadian WCM, received 7% of the assets of the larger international fund, which equated to approximately 164 million each. BlackRock was hired as the transition manager for this event and was on point for handling the logistics with the custodian, the legacy managers, the target managers, as well as trading the portfolio to provide to the new target managers. The entire transition was completed on time and in line with what the cost expectations were. BlackRock began trading on September 22nd and transferred the completed portfolios to Acadian and WCM on September 30th with a go live date of October 1st, as I mentioned. Looking at the cost of that transition, trading costs came in extremely close to the pre-trade estimates that we did receive, with direct costs, which are commissions and taxes, coming in at 16 basis points of the traded value of that portfolio.
What was that? Do you have a total number?
That equates to about $528,000. So those are the direct costs. In addition to the direct costs, we have the spread and market impact costs, which are also trading costs that you need to incur. And that was at about 55 basis points or at about 1.8 million. So a total cost for the transition was about 70 basis points, which is the traded value of that 328 million or so that we did trade. which again was in line with expectations, in line with what we expect given the type of assets that this was, given that it was international, dealing with a lot of countries, dealing with taxes, dealing with other fees, as well as just dealing with some of the illiquidity of the nature of the small cap portfolios that we were trading into. So it did come in as expected. Again, it's certainly more expensive than saying trading a large cap US portfolio where a lot of those costs would not be. Overall, the transition went as expected and in line with what we thought that the costs should be. On the passive side, the change for the benchmark, that took place at the end of September as well, and there was no cost to this transition since it's essentially just an internal transfer from one fund to another within BlackRock. So they absorb those costs as we do that. So no costs on that piece, and that one went off as well. So happy with the way it went. A lot of moving parts when you're talking about a transition of this size, when you're talking about dealing with international equities and a lot of small cap companies. I thought it went well, and everything was completed on time, and as I mentioned, within expectations. So certainly happy to open it up to any questions that anyone has. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to our 403 IPS.
The investment performance report first, and the IPS.
IPR.
Yes, IPR. Yeah, so now we'll turn to the 403B program report. If you turn to slide 3 of this presentation, you'll see, again, we've obviously already had a pretty significant conversation on the 403B program as a whole. So I'll try to make my comments brief, given that we will be dissolving this at some point in the next year or so. You can see the assets as of September 30th on page 3 here. Total assets were at about 30.4 million, which was slightly down from the previous quarter, with 16 million in passive funds and about 14.4 million in active funds. Looking at the performance, which the board members do have in their decks on page 4. Callan talked about kind of the investment environment for the quarter, and it was pretty challenging as sentiment turned negative with supply chain disruptions, with higher inflation kind of marks. And, we saw that across both of these portfolios as well, with major equity indices, both US and international, kind of flat to negative for the quarter. Similar story for fixed income, with treasury yields largely unchanged in a pretty flat return environment. So for our active portfolios, we saw the same thing. I'll just walk through them quickly. So for the Metropolitan West total return bond fund, they slightly outperformed their benchmark by about 9 basis points, and they remain ahead for the year to date. Outperformance for the quarter was driven primarily by an underweight to corporate credit, as well as a focus on higher yielding opportunities. And longer term relative performance remains strong as well for that fund. Moving to the Principal Diversified Real Asset Fund. This fund outperformed the benchmark for the quarter as well. The fund was up about 1.47% versus the benchmark return of 1.2%. And the relative performance here was driven by strong manager performance within infrastructure, as well as strong manager performance within natural resources. And looking at longer term performance here, this strategy, it remains strong as well, outperforming in all of the time periods that we show, which is kind of the 1, 3, and 5 year time periods. Moving to the Vanguard Windsor Fund. This fund outperformed its benchmark as well for the quarter, although absolute returns were slightly negative at negative 12 basis points. Positive stock selection drove much of this outperformance, specifically in the communication services sector, as well as IT and energy. Again, this fund as well is performing very strong on a longer term basis, outperforming on the 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year time period. For the T. Rowe Price Blue Chip Growth Fund, this fund returned 0.45% for the quarter, which was underperforming the benchmark by about 60 basis points. Stock selection continues to be the largest contributor to this relative performance, specifically within consumer discretionary, communications, and consumer staples sectors. This fund's had a struggle with the longer term performance as well, as it is underperforming in all of the longer time periods on the 1, 3, and 5 year time periods that we show. And given the performance struggles, as well as some of the organizational changes that I think was discussed at the last meeting with the CEO retiring this year, as well as the lead PM for this fund retiring at year end, and they switched the lead PM beginning in October of this year. Obviously we'll keep a close eye on the strategy, but again, if we're dissolving the 403B program in whole, I wouldn't expect any big recommended changes to the investment lineup over the next year. But this one is one of the ones that we'll certainly be keeping an extra close eye on.
So there's 30 million in the 403.
Yes.
And how many managers are there?
There are, including the passive options, there's 12. There's 6 active and 6 passive options.
And the one you just referred to is one of the passive, active.
Yes, the T. Rowe Price is the Russell, the large cap growth fund.
Yeah. How much is that?
There is, in that fund, there is 1.4 million.
Okay. So okay. And the passive active breakdown is?
So it's 16 million in passive and 14.4 in active.
So this is 10% of the passive?
Yeah,
10% of the active?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Looking at the DFA US Small Cap Fund. So as a reminder, this is the only manager for the 403B that we do have on the watch list. But we have seen some good recent performance for this portfolio, which is very good news. They outperformed their benchmark by almost 3% for the quarter, even though the absolute returns were negative, given the small cap nature of this, and small caps did have a negative return for the quarter. But they did outperform significantly, and they are outperforming quite significantly for the 1 year number by almost 9%. So certainly they struggled for quite some time, but we've seen a big turnaround there in the last year of their performance, with very, very strong outperformance for the last year. They still trail on the 3 and the 5 year, but by much less than they did previously, given their strong recent performance. So we're certainly happy to see that. And the last fund I'll mention is the Bailey Gifford International Equity Fund. This is a very similar fund to what we have in the 401k fund. And they did struggle a bit for the quarter. They underperformed the benchmark by a little more than 2%, mainly due to stock selection, again, within communication services, healthcare, and financials. Short-term performance has been a bit challenging, underperforming for the quarter as well as the year, but they still have extremely strong long-term performance, significantly outperforming for the 3 and 5 years. So no long-term concerns with that manager. Those will end my comments on the performance for the 403B. Happy to answer any questions on any of that.
Any questions? All right. Thank you very much, Chris. And Vern, thank you for filling in
Oh, yeah, of course.
on all that. We need a vote.
I haven't gone over the IPS, which will take about 30 seconds. So for IPS for the 403B, same thing as the 401k. It's the annual review for the 403B. Again, Callan doesn't opine on this. They're not our consultant for the 403B, so it's solely on staff. But again, you'll see the changes in there. It's virtually the same thing that we talked about with the 401k. No major changes whatsoever. Change in the index name for the fixed income indices with the removing of Barclays, as well as you'll see in there's a few minor grammatical changes that we made as we were going through it. Nothing substantive in nature at all. Excuse me. And you'll see the changes there on several other pages, which we included in your pack. But other than that, we feel that this IPS is in good shape as well, and then no material changes need to be made at this time.
Okay, Treasurer will make a motion to approve the changes.
Thank you. Second.
I second Shavella.
Thank you, Shavella. Further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
James Lunston.
Aye.
Linda Barron.
Aye.
Michael Lewis,
Aye.
Steve Bean,
Aye.
and Wyndon Hibbler.
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you very much. We now up to our public comment section. Got a very special guest signed up for public comment. Board Member Steve Bean. Steve, you have the floor.
Do?
Sorry? Did you sign up for public comment?
Is he on mute?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. No, I did not sign that I'm aware of.
Did you sign up for public comment?
No.
Okay. Well, now I deem public comment section closed. So, thank you all very much. I'll go around the horn, starting with Nels for any board comments you'd like to make.
I'm good, sir. Thank you.
Talk to you in a minute.
Afterwards.
Oh. Yes.
Merry Christmas.
Any any comments from our board members on the phone?
Yes, I just would like to say happy holidays to everyone.
Thank you, Shabella.
Thank you.
I concur with that.
Thank you.
I do as well. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to everybody.
Thank you. With that, I want to thank you all. Thank the staff for everything they did. Patty, and this is Victoria, who's going to be taking on some additional roles and responsibilities. And so we appreciate you
Thank you, sir.
learning these processes. We went through a lot of stuff today, and I appreciate the positive comments that we have and suggestions, and we intend to take all those into account. I will close by reminding you something Jeff's very familiar with. He may even have it tattooed on his arm somewhere, but he used to work for a gentleman by the name of Kelly King, who said that if you focus on the why, if you get the why right, you can figure out the how. And in terms of this 403B transition, I think everybody knows the why we're doing this. I think we got the why correct. Now we're going to spend our energy on making sure we get the how right. So, and I'm saying that publicly in hopes, because you know how my memory is, in hopes that when we put out our first communication, that we'll actually maybe even incorporate that sentence. Focus on the how, getting the why right, and then focus on the how. So with that, I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and I'll entertain a motion in honor of all those who have a missing place setting this year at their holiday festivities for lots of different reasons. And we'll close our meeting in honor of all of our public servants who are not with us this year.
So move.
Second.
Any further discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Falwell,
Aye.
Shavella Thomas,
Aye.
James Lunston,
Aye.
Michael Lewis,
Aye.
Steve Bean,
Aye.
and Wyndon Hibbler.
Aye.
Oh, sorry.
This conference will now be recorded.
You want to chat outside?